I yield to Ms. Escobar, and I'm going to go to the border with her on August 1st, and I think it's great what you're doing, and we need to go see it for ourselves. And
Young lady from Texas.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And I'd invite any of my colleagues to join me on any of the congressional delegation visits, please. I want to clarify something, a myth that is being perpetrated over and over and over again that needs to stop. This idea that the Democratic Party somehow was in denial about what was happening on the U.S.-Mexico border is really offensive. Here's what we were saying. We were saying that we saw the challenge facing us. I saw the challenge facing us. I saw it up close at my front door, my community. When it became a crisis is when this administration chose to implement policies that were cruel. That's why it's a humanitarian crisis. This country has incredible resources. DHS has incredible resources. It's not a question of resources, it's a question of will. Thank you. I yield back.
And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Alabama seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes.
For the benefit of your members and ours on both sides of the aisle, I'd like for you to lay out for us what exactly, with respect to the Mueller hearing next week, what exactly you agreed to, and most importantly, why you agreed to it.
I'm not going to comment on that at this hearing. It is beyond the scope of this hearing.
All right, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to the ranking member.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the gentlelady yielding.
Let me just correct. It's not a hearing, it's a markup. It's beyond the scope of this markup.
I guess wondering why half the committee can't answer what questions next week is beyond the scope of a markup, but that's fine. But Mr. Cohen, and I appreciate Mr. Cohen, we have done a lot of things together, but he's entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. I have never said underling today. It's not something that I typically use, not said that. So he can find it from someone else that may have said it, but you do not attribute that to the ranking member. And that didn't happen. This is a whole different issue we're dealing with. But also it goes back to something that was said earlier, because we were actually sent letters saying we've actually outreached, because I made in my opening statement that a lot of this has never been outreached. Let's show you how important immigration was to this majority. That in January they reached out, the next reach out was May. The next formal reach out was May 20th or 29th, around that time. That's how long it took to reach back out on an issue that is of very much importance. And we agree that it's important, but let's don't become all of a sudden saying it's just, you know, something that we need to do subpoenas on that we've not followed up. Even you've not followed up on it, you've not sent that. If from January to May tells me that there was other things on your mind. When we understand this, the interesting thing also is the fact that, again, with facts being facts, Mr. Cohen will get to ask questions next week. I don't think you're going to get to, Mr. Raskin. And you're good. Shame you got left out. And also, we can't get a reason why either. I think the interesting thing today is this is just a continuing free fall of process in this committee. And that's the sad part that we have today. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Florida.
The gentlelady from Texas, in her prior claim of time, said it was offensive to assert that Democrats were in denial about the crisis on the border. I would invite my Democratic colleagues to go to my official Twitter account, where I have posted an interview from January 9th, 2019. It was on CNN, not exactly a hostile network for you folks. And it's, well, let me just play what the question was. And it's Jim Clyburn, the Democratic whip, answering the question.
The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border, is there?
Absolutely not.
The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border, is there?
Absolutely not.
The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border, is there?
Absolutely not.
The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border, is there?
Absolutely not.
The president said there's a humanitarian
Point of order.
crisis at the border, is there?
Absolutely not.
The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border, is there?
Absolutely.
I guess it's a parliamentary inquiry. Is it appropriate for a member to just put on a loop a teeny soundbite out of context? Is that allowed?
The gentleman controls the time. I'm not aware of any rule that would preclude him from doing so.
Thank you.
Gentleman is.
Thank you. I think I still control the time. And I just think that's quite something. That when you're fed back your own words from your own leadership from earlier this year, you think that's out of context and inappropriate and not allowed. Again, we didn't raise the issue. It was the gentlelady from Texas that said, these allegations from Republicans that we were in denial, they're offensive. We've always known of the crisis. And the Democratic whip laughed. Absolutely not. Laughed. Thought it was laughable. Thought it was funny. You know who doesn't think it's funny? The Trump administration, because Secretary McAleenan has been ringing the warning bell for months about the crisis. He begged you all to take action more quickly. One of the reasons why so many young people, so many vulnerable people are in tragic conditions is because we didn't act when the administration wanted us to provide funding that was absolutely necessary to care for people. And so it is appropriate to question why we are in these conditions, but it wasn't the Republicans that were in denial. It was all of you, and it was in your own words from your own leadership. Be offended with the Democratic whip, not House Republicans. I yield back.
The gentleman yields
Oh,
back.
it's actually my time. He's yielding back
Gentlelady
to
from
me.
Alabama.
I'll yield the last 12 seconds to Mr. McClintock.
Just to fill in a few gaps, Speaker Pelosi called the situation a fake crisis at the border. Chuck Schumer called it a crisis that does not exist. Denny Hoyer said there's no crisis at the border. Hakeem Jeffries said there's no crisis at the border. Our chairman said there is no crisis at the border. I could go on, but I see the time's expired.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.